Hello everybody, this is Maya Zahira with Psychic Protection Sanctuary, and we are now live in our Spiritual Empowerment Community Facebook group. Today's lesson is how to identify ungrounded spiritual teachings. So we usually have quite a few people joining us live, and as people join, we are going to be doing some brainstorming. So right at the beginning here, though, we don't have a lot of people live yet. So I just want to say hello to all of the people who are watching the replay on either Facebook or YouTube. And I want to encourage you to participate just as fully as if you were joining live. So feel free to share in the comments because especially with this particular topic, really the more we put our heads together and brainstorm about this topic, the better. So we have a few people joining us. Go ahead and say hello. Type hello. Tell us where you're joining from. Excuse me. And we're going to get into our lesson in just a minute, how to identify ungrounded spiritual teachings. But first, let me just give you a little tidbit as we are getting everybody into the classroom. Again, my name's Maya Zahira, and the name of my business is Psychic Protection Sanctuary, and this is a virtual space. I work with clients in person at my place, but the majority of the people that I work with are online. So I do one-on-one sessions online, and I also do a lot of classes and programs. So actually, I do more teaching these days than I do one-on-one sessions. That's how I'm choosing to work with my time. So if you'd like to find out more about what I do, and if you'd like to have the option to work with me more closely, you can find more details on my website, psychicprotectionsanctuary.com. And let's go ahead and say hello to all the people who are joining. And again, our topic for today is how to identify ungrounded spiritual teachings. And we're going to talk about what that even means. But let's say hi to everybody. And as usual, I'm keeping it real. So I'm looking at my notes and coughing and doing all that normal human stuff. Amanda Hale. Hello, Maya. I'm from the Northland, Kansas City area. Hello. For those of you who don't know, I live out in the country, out west of the Kansas City area. So I'm renting a sweet little house on the edge of a farm. And so if you notice that there's a lot of Kansas or Missouri people on these Facebook Lives, that is why. But I work with people everywhere, not just the United States, but also Australia and Europe and Middle East even. So welcome to everybody. Tana is joining from Independence, Missouri. Hello, Tana. Melissa, hi from North Carolina. Hello again, Melissa. Are you still in North Carolina? Are you still in California visiting relatives, or are you back in North Carolina now? Yvonne says, hi, Chi-Town. What does that mean? Where are you? I'm sure that's slang for something, but I don't know since I'm not from there. So tell us where you are from. Where you are. What does that mean, Yvonne? Jeannie is joining us from Piper, Kansas. Hello, everybody. Okay. Thank you for participating and saying hello. I want to just let you know that today's class, I really would especially like to encourage participation and brainstorming. So sometimes I will admit, sometimes I get on the Facebook Live for this group, Spiritual Empowerment Community, or my other free group, Psychic Protection Sanctuary, and I have a lesson that I want to teach, and I'm teaching it, and then we have questions, right? We have questions in between. This is a little bit different. This is, I really want us to all be brainstorming together, so it's not just my thoughts on this, but all of our thoughts. So the topic for today is how to identify ungrounded spiritual teachings. So as we're finishing up with saying hi to everybody who's joining, I want you to just start to think about, what do you think it means when I refer to ungrounded spiritual teachings or ungrounded spiritual practices? What do you think that means? Ungrounded spirituality. What does that mean? And then can you just start to brainstorm and think about any examples or any things that you've experienced, or that you've practiced or that you've observed that seem really ungrounded. So we're going to be going into some different categories of this. I have a lot of notes here, but these were just some ideas that I jotted down, and I'm hoping that we can all brainstorm together. So get ready to really use your brain and a little bit more than the Facebook Lives when you're just listening to me, okay? Oh, Yvonne is from Chicago. I knew that had to have been like if you're a local, you know what that means. I hadn't heard of that before. So awesome. Hello, Yvonne. Very happy to see you. Melissa says, I'm back as of last night. Well, I hope that you're glad to be home and getting regrounded in your own space. Okay, so before we start into our lesson, I want to just give a shout out to an author that I greatly admire. His name is Jeff Brown. His name almost fell out of my brain there for a second. I have one of those, I don't know if any of you can relate, but when you have to say someone's name, then you suddenly get a block and you forget it. That almost just happened. I want to just give a shout out to the author, Jeff Brown. He has written a number of books. I don't remember the titles to all of them, but there's one in particular that is his most recent publication, and it's called Grounded Spirituality. And the reason why I bring up this book is because he has really been, Jeff has really been a way shower, a trailblazer in the idea of really bringing spirituality back down to earth and helping everybody understand how to get more grounded. Because a lot of the popular New Age and spirituality movement, a lot of the practices and beliefs have become really, really ungrounded. And I'm going to talk about what that looks like. Very, very ungrounded. And Jeff Brown has really been a trailblazer in helping bring that to light. A lot of times we get comfortable with our practices. And so when someone points out that maybe those practices might be time for us to evolve to a different way of doing things. Sometimes when that's pointed out to us, we can get kind of defensive, and that seems to be human nature. So I just have so much appreciation for Jeff Brown being the trailblazer in this area, because a lot of people who are really, really attached to their ungrounded spiritual beliefs and practices, get really angry with Jeff, and he handles it splendidly, in my opinion. And then there's a lot of people who are really wanting a more grounded spirituality, and we're so excited that he's written this book. So if someone is super, super attached to spiritual ideas that are really, really ungrounded, this might be really triggering for you. And that's okay. Like, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with getting triggered. I hope you are too. And, I think the other thing that I want to say is that personally, I have total respect for everyone's freedom to decide whatever is your right practice, spiritual beliefs, etc., etc. So I'm not here to tell anyone that you're wrong or that you're not doing it right or anything like that. But what I am wanting to do is just shed some light. And if there are some practices that perhaps might be kind of ungrounded, it'll give you the opportunity to have some aha moments, or to think about your spirituality and get more intentional about it. Like, is this really what I want to be believing or practicing? And if you still get a resounding yes, then that's great. Follow your inner guidance. Okay. So, okay, Melissa says, one thing is when they always teach all up energies, but don't teach about grounding. Yes, that's a really good example of ungrounded practices where there's like, let's say you go to a class or an event or some kind of spiritual activity where they're like doing things and talking about raising your vibration. Let's raise our vibration so that we can ascend and all this stuff. But there's nothing about grounding or about anchoring into your body. So that is definitely an example of an ungrounded spiritual practice. Give me a thumbs up or a heart if you can relate to that. If you have either have practiced it or if you've observed it, if you've seen people doing this in the spiritual community where they're all about like ascending and raising your vibration higher and higher and higher, but never really talking about grounding. Have you ever been to a workshop before where it was all about raising your vibe, but there was no grounding? And maybe you felt like a total space cadet, like you were so spaced out by the time you left, because you were so like out of your body and not grounded. Yeah, so give me some thumbs ups if you, I don't know if that's the right way to say it, thumb ups, thumb up, or hearts, if you can relate to that. Erica says hello from Indiana. Hello, Erica. Melissa says the practice is to amp you up, but don't ground. Yes. So what I did as I was brainstorming, excuse me, what I did as I was brainstorming is I made some notes. I categorized everything into 3 categories. This is not an exhaustive list. I'm sure there's many, many different ways that spirituality can be ungrounded, but these are the 3 categories that I came up with. Before I go into the 3 categories, let me just explain what I mean by ungrounded. So ungrounded practices are practices that take you out of your body, that take you out of your normal human experience, that really are all about taking you into the spiritual, like up and away above your crown chakra, and not anchoring down into your physical body, and not anchoring to the earth. Okay. Now, FYI, excuse me, it's my personal belief that a healthy form of spirituality is a combination of connecting with spirit and connecting with earth, and really connecting, anchoring into your body. Now, this is my personal belief. I believe it to be true, but I also recognize that there's billions of different spiritual beliefs on the planet. It's my belief that if we all wanted to ascend our human experience, we would have just stayed in spirit. We wouldn't have come into human form. Like, we came here for a reason. We came here to have a human experience, to have a human body, to have the messiness of the human experience. We came here for that. Again, if we hadn't have intentionally come here for that, we would have just stayed in spirit on the other side. But there's all these spiritual practices that are all about transcending the physical. The word transcend and transcendence is used a lot in spiritual practices, names of spiritual businesses. And I'm not saying that those names are bad, but it's all about transcending the human experience. But you came here to be a human and to have your human experience. So that's my 2 cents. That's my personal belief. And just like take that, see if it resonates, compare it to what you believe, okay? Because we all have different beliefs. Here are the 3 different categories that I split this up into. So, different types of ungrounded spiritual teachings. Number one, emotional dissociation. Emotional dissociation. Before I go on to number 2 and number 3, because I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to go into detail about each of them. Let me just talk about what emotional dissociation is, because there might be some of you who don't know what it is. Emotional, I'm going to read to you, because this, I thought I wrote it down from a website, but, oh yes, okay. I'm going to read exactly from this website, and then I'm going to tell you the source. Dissociation is a mental process that causes a lack of connection in a person's thoughts, memory, and sense of identity. And this is from mentalhealthamerica.net. So how I would put that into my own words, because I think that's more of like a clinical definition. My layperson's definition is that dissociation is any practice of disconnecting from your emotions and your feelings and your own identity. Okay? Ooh, that reminds me. I want to write something down so I don't forget it. All right. So that's number one, emotional dissociation. Now, you may already have some ideas pop into your head about spiritual practices that encourage you to dissociate from your authentic feelings. Or you might be drawing a blank, but once I start going into all of the examples that I have, it might click for you. Okay, so number two category of ungrounded spiritual practices is shunning, shaming, and gaslighting. So any spiritual practices that encourage shunning others, shaming others, or gaslighting others. Like, in other words, making them feel like they're crazy for having their own opinions or feelings. Okay. And number three, disconnection from your humanity. Disconnection from your human aspects. So those are the three categories that I've split the different ideas that I have about the many ungrounded spiritual teachings. Emotional dissociation, shunning, shaming, and gaslighting, and disconnection from your humanity. So let's start with number one, emotional dissociation. I'm going to talk about some examples. Now, one of the reasons why I'm teaching about this in this Facebook Live is because I think it's important, as the facilitator of this group, to help point out some aspects in popular spirituality that might be dysfunctional. And so as we just like analyze these things and look these things over, I think you'll be able to get some different perspective that, oh yeah, I see, maybe that could be a bit grounded. As I go through these though, I want you to remember one thing, and it's that it seems that humans tend to have the habit of polarizing. So like really bouncing to one way or the other. It's like you bounce way over here or way over here. So some of the examples, probably a lot of the examples that I'm going to give, would actually be healthy and not dysfunctional if they're utilized in a balanced way and not over applied and not misapplied. Okay, so let's keep that in mind, that when we practice some of these spiritual ideas, they can be healthy, certainly, when we do it in a balanced way and apply the spiritual ideals at the appropriate times in the appropriate way. But when we over apply, that's when we get into extremism. When we apply it to everything all the time, then we get into some really ungrounded practices. So let's start with our first category, emotional dissociation. Melissa just added to the second category when I was talking about shunning, shaming, and gaslighting. She said, or demonizing. Yep, all of that. Exactly. So, number one, emotional dissociation. The first one that is near and dear to my heart is the positive vibes only movement. So I'm going to remind you, emotional dissociation is when you are you're separating yourself from your authentic emotions, okay? So you might feel angry, or you might feel really sad, or you might feel depressed or frustrated, or whatever, like any quote not positive emotions, and instead of allowing yourself to experience those and dive in and see what that's all about so you can heal it, there's this dissociation that's taught. It's very commonly taught in a lot of spiritual circles, is to don't feel anything that's negative. So the positive vibes only, what do I want to call it? The positive vibes only movement. It's definitely a movement. There's t-shirts, there's memes all over Facebook. It's like, if you say anything that's not positive, then you're just being really negative. And part of the positive vibes only movement, I think originated from the law of attraction idea. The law of attraction is that whatever you focus on, you bring into your life. Well, that's, again, we've oversimplified and we've polarized. The law of attraction is one of many laws of reality, and it's not the only law. So, this whole oversimplification that if you focus on anything negative, or if you let yourself feel anything negative or say anything negative, suddenly all these horrible things will come raining down into your life like stones from heaven, and all this horrible stuff is going to happen. I really think that's where the positive vibes only movement came from, is from a distorted use of the law of attraction. But what happens when you're not allowing yourself to experience your authentic feelings? Okay, so when you're saying, or let's say there's a meme on Facebook that says, whenever you have a negative thought, just retrain your thinking and replace it with a positive thought. Okay, that is an example of ungrounded spiritual practice and emotional dissociation. Okay, a more grounded approach would be, when you have a negative thought come up, take time to explore it and curiously ask, what's this about? And let's dive into this and see what the seed origin is so we can heal it. But the popularized version instead is, if you have a negative thought, simply throw a bandage of a positive thought over it, totally ignore the negative thought, hope it goes away, and ignore the fact that you've just stuffed it deep down, where it's going to fester for months or perhaps years until it eventually manifests into an emotional or physical issue. So that's what happens with the positive vibes only movement. Okay, so let's go ahead and read some comments. So right now we're in the category of emotional dissociation. Melissa says, I was in a spiritual group that over the course of 14 years, the leader went from being really great, from being really great to encouraging, shaming, shunning, gaslighting, and demonizing. Yeah, I am sorry to hear that, Melissa, and yet I'm not surprised. There's just a lot of that happening, and I'm not sure why. Barbara says, questioning organized religion. Are you saying that you are questioning organized religion? Is that what you are saying? And that's I totally get that, if that's what you're saying. Melissa says, not teaching, and this teacher that you were referring to was not teaching discernment or questioning. Exactly. I am all for discernment and questioning. You can question me all day long. If you do, I'm going to be like, yes, this person is using their own brain and you're not just listening to what I say and just taking it in. So that always makes me really happy when people are doing that. Melissa says, one never heals. If you don't acknowledge that you have healing to do, one can attract healing under the law of attraction too. That's so important. That's right on. Barbara says, it's the fake it till you make it. Yeah, so the fake it till you make it is not only in New Age spirituality, but I mean, that's in the business world. That's kind of everywhere. This fake it till you make it. Whether it's starting a new business or trying to heal from an illness, just pretend like you're well. I'm going to talk about that today too. Fake it till you make it. Melissa says the feelings turn in on yourself and eat at you, and then you get physically ill. I personally, Melissa, I agree with you. I think that there's a saying that what we resist persists. So with this positive vibes only emotional dissociation thing, when you're resisting those negative thoughts or feelings, then what happens? Then it persists. It starts to run the show, maybe subconsciously or unconsciously, but it's still running the show. And sometimes it really can, I believe, if you stuff enough junk down, that it eventually does end up causing illness, physical or mental. That's my belief. And Barbara says, yes, exactly, that you're questioning organized religion. Definitely. So let's give a couple more examples of emotional dissociation. There's also a lot of teachings about forgiveness, and I'm going to term it premature forgiveness. Now, I'm not saying that forgiveness is a bad thing. I think that forgiving people is wonderful. But by premature forgiveness, I'm referring to the encouraging people to forgive a horrendous act that was done to them, for example, before they're even ready to forgive. Sometimes it takes many years, and sometimes it takes forever to forgive something that was horrendous. And the premature forgiveness, people are encouraged to it's just like the positive vibes thing. They're encouraged to just slap this like forgiveness onto the top of it. Like, I forgive you. But meanwhile, deep down, the person is still hurting. They really don't actually authentically forgive. And there's no shame in that. I mean, we're just being real here, just being human. And this encouragement of premature forgiveness and saying, well, if you don't forgive, then it's hurting you, it's hurting them. And there's shaming that gets into the second category. There's shaming that's done. If someone was a victim of some horrific crime and they're not at a point of forgiveness, a lot of people will shame them. And all of that whole ball of wax is just totally ungrounded. A more grounded approach is to just find grace in the fact that you are wherever you are at in your personal forgiveness or unforgiveness. And just have grace and just find grace in that. Just like allow that process to occur in a natural way without trying to force it, without trying to emotionally dissociate. Another form of emotional dissociation shows up in what I'll call the oneness movement. The oneness, ONENESS, the oneness movement, or the oneness idea, is all about the idea that we are all one. We are not separate. You are not separate from me, or not separate from this other person. So we're all one. And so that creates this like disconnection where we're no longer connected with our uniqueness. We are just like, we're all part of the whole, we're all part of like divine source. So it's just this whole like disembodied like existence, and there's no individuality. And that reminds me, as I started talking about that, I wrote down the word ego. There's all of this ego blasting going on in the spiritual community right now. And I think that really it's very emotionally dissociative. There's this confusion. People use the word ego, and what they're talking about is being egotistical, like being totally full of yourself. And so they're confusing the two. Ego just has to do with your individuality and your personality, who you are. And there's all these teachings and Facebook memes all about not being in your ego, and this is about your ego, and you need to release your ego, get rid of your ego, blah blah blah. And sure, it's not good to be like totally full of yourself and be a total asshole to people, but that's not what we're talking about here. What they're talking about is obliterating your individuality, obliterating your ego. Now think about that. I mean, I, for one, celebrate my uniqueness, and I hope that other people do as well. I like who I am and my personality and my essence, and I don't feel any need to obliterate my ego and only exist in oneness. Like, again, let's go back to what I said in the beginning, that we came to this planet to have a human existence, to not only be in a human body, but to be separate. Okay, but to be separate individuals. And remember what I also said about polarized beliefs, that there tends to be this idea that if one thing is true, then the other is false. Well, what if, is it possible that oneness is true and individuality is also true? So both, like, we are all part of the whole, that's true, but we're all also individuals. So this whole idea of obliterating the ego and dissociating from your personal self is really unhealthy. It really is. So we need to come to a more grounded, balanced sense with that. I have some more ideas about emotional dissociation, but let's get to our comments. Melissa says, in some areas, talking to yourself under the fake it till you make it is to keep talking to your subconscious in order to reprogram it. So it's all about intent. Yeah, Melissa, I'm really, really glad that you brought that up. So remember, everybody, what I said earlier about balance. So some of these practices are not always all bad. They can be good practices. Like, for example, positive vibes only, rather than saying positive vibes only and nothing else is allowed. We could say, like, we strive to have positive vibes as much as possible while also being authentic. Like, that's how I do positive vibes, is if I am having an experience that's less than positive and I feel like I need to express it, I will. I'll get it off my chest. I'll process it. But then overall, my overall intent is to try to have the most positive experience in my life, and not be pessimistic all the time. So when I'm saying the positive vibes only movement is not the greatest, I'm not promoting pessimistic vibes only. You get what I'm saying? So it's all about balance. And just like what Melissa has said here, the fake it till you make it, that can benefit sometimes when you're like out of your comfort zone and you're you're getting ready to up level, and you're kind of scared to do it, and you might have to just jump in and fake it for a little while until you're able to match that new vibration. So that can definitely be helpful. So awesome. Thank you for bringing that up. Melissa says, and then there's the Hawaiian. Oh, I can never say this right, so I'm so sorry. And you guys are going to laugh at me. Ho'opono. Oh my God, I can't say it. Ho'oponopono. I think I said it, or I was pretty close. My sister uses this to great success to heal her abuse issues, but then after 40 years, she was ready to heal. So that's another great example. Melissa, if you can remember the exact script for that Hawaiian practice, I don't remember it exactly, but feel free to share it. It goes something like, I love you, please forgive me. I forget what else it is, but it's like 3 different sentences. I want to give you an example of something that happened to me that was very ungrounded. And as usual, I'm not giving any identifying information because that's not what this is about. But I had someone use that Hawaiian practice with me in communication, and it was done in such a way that the person was dissociating from the actual experience, okay? They were dissociating and disconnecting from what was really happening. It was their way of saying, I don't really want to talk about this anymore. So there was someone who I went to their workshop, and when I was there, they decided that my car had spilled some oil onto their driveway. And so they told me that during the lunch break, when all the other students were outside eating lunch on the beautiful sunny day, that I was supposed to pull my car out onto the street and that I was supposed to scrub the whole driveway, okay? And so that was a very uncomfortable situation, and it was really hard to discern what to do when it was actually happening, because I didn't want to make a scene for that teacher, but I really should have just told her to F off, because I was supposed to scrub the entire driveway, not just the little oil speck, okay? So it was very odd, and it almost seemed like it was done to keep me in my place, like, let's just push you down, little one. It was a very, very odd thing. So I being the communicator that I am, I reached out 3 or 4 times after this happened by email, asking if we could get together and talk, because I wanted to talk about what had happened with the driveway. And each time it was like, no, I don't know, no, I'm too busy, I don't have time to meet with you, blah, blah, blah. So finally, after numerous attempts, I emailed again and I said, hey, I've really tried to have a face-to-face, in-person conversation about this, and because it's really bugging me, I really need to get it off my chest. And so, I'd rather not do it in email, but I really have tried to talk about it in person, and that hasn't worked. So here goes. And I told her how, it seemed like it was very shaming behavior, which is our second category, that it was really intended to put me in my place. And it just really, I was very uncomfortable with the whole idea of being asked to scrub the whole driveway in front of all the other students. It seemed very odd. And her response back to me, she emailed back, and she said, she quoted the Hawaiian practice, which is, let's see, I'm going to see if Melissa typed it, if she helped us out there. It's something like, I should remember this. There's 3 lines. I can't remember all 3 of them. It's like, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, or something like that. I know I have it a little bit wrong, but it was exactly the ho'opono routine, okay? And so she sent that, and that was it. Or actually, she sent that quote, and then she said, "We're not discussing this any further." And so that's a great example. Oh, here, I think, okay, Melissa says, Ho'oponopono. There are different forms of it out there. Instead of saying it to others, my sister says it to her soul. And she changed the original order. I'm sorry, I forgive you, I love you, thank you. I'm sorry, I forgive you, I love you, I thank you. She says to her soul, I love you, I'm sorry, I forgive you, and I thank you. Yeah, so I can see how that is a beautiful practice. And this is a great example of how a spiritual practice in and of itself can be very helpful, but when it is misapplied, then it goes into the ungrounded category. So I love what you shared about your sister, Melissa, and it just seems like a really beautiful practice. And I think a lot of people have used that practice in a really beautiful way. But can you all see how, any of these spiritual practices, including this beautiful practice, can be used in a way to spiritually bypass? Spiritual bypassing is the official term now. Spiritual bypassing means that you are using any spiritual practice or belief or idea to bypass your authentic human experience, your authentic emotions, or to deflect from what's really happening there. So I actually had that written down, spiritual bypassing, as also an example of emotional dissociation. So let's go back to some other comments. Melissa says, you need ego to take care of your safety and survival issues. It's ego which keeps your body safe. Yes, I agree. Melissa says, oneness is true at the level of source, but we are individuated sparks of source, here to let source know of life through each of the different lenses we hold. Yes, I agree. So beautifully worded. And Barbara says, boom, mind-blowing. And Nick says, Nick is here. And Nick says, wow, what the? Question mark, exclamation mark. Melissa says, just Google for different forms and ho'oponopono, and don't be afraid to change it for you. Exactly. Yeah, it's a beautiful practice. So within emotional dissociation, there's also, oh my gosh, I'm just going to go on and on about all this. There's also something that I call addictive spirituality. So I am not an expert in addiction. This is just an observation that I've made, that sometimes it can be the case that when someone is healing from an addiction to a substance or a habit or practice or whatever, so whether it's alcohol or drugs or sex addiction or video games or what have you, that as they're working on healing that addiction, then they replace that addiction with spirituality. So they're just trading one addiction for another, and they're still emotionally dissociating. Okay, they're still not addressing the original, whatever it is that's the original seed of the addiction. They're not addressing that. They just slap a whole bunch of spirituality, whether it's Christianity, whether it's New Age, whether it's something else. It ends up getting slapped onto the original issue, which never gets healed. And Melissa says, the practice doesn't mean you negate the other person's actions. You let go of whatever you took on and bring back the love for yourself. Exactly. Speaking about the Hawaiian practice. Okay. All right. So we talked about spiritual bypassing. So that's what I have for emotional dissociation. If you have anything to add to that, then feel free to share. And we're going to go on to the next category of ungrounded spiritual or potentially ungrounded spiritual practices. The second category is manipulation, shunning, shaming, gaslighting, demonizing, that whole shebang. So let's talk about this. There's belief systems in the New Age movement right now that really strongly encourage victim blaming, but it's so woven into the belief systems that it's not overtly identified as victim blaming unless you're really grounded and paying attention. So let me give you an example. I was having dinner with somebody a few years ago, a new friend, and he was telling me about how he was going through this yoga teacher training. Now, it just happened to be yoga teacher training, but it could have been anything. It could have been like energy healer training or whatever. Okay. But it happened to be yoga teacher training. And he was talking about how, he was learning so much about spirituality from this teacher, because it wasn't just the physical stuff that he was learning. The particular teacher was also very much about the spiritual teachings. So he said he was very excited and telling me about all these different ways that he was growing spiritually and these different things that he was learning. And he started talking about how we attract, like our job is to raise our vibration and to vibrate in such a way that we attract only good things into our lives. And he said to me across the table at the Indian restaurant, for example, now this is really what he said. He said, for example, if a woman is raped, it is because she was vibrating at a lower frequency, and so she was a match for being raped. If she had been vibrating at a higher frequency, she would not have gotten raped. Okay, I'm just going to tell you that I really wanted to kick this guy underneath the table and say to him, you attracted that kick. I wanted to throw the hot dish in his face, and then he'd say, why'd you do that? Well, your vibration must have attracted it. But I was too nice at the time, and I was like, well, he clearly believes this bullshit, and there's nothing I can say that's going to make him think otherwise, because he adored his spiritual teacher, and who was a woman. And so that's a prime example of victim blaming. Okay. He was getting fed all this stuff about if something horrific happens to you, it's because you had a faulty vibration. Okay. Now, his teacher didn't say, I'm going to teach you how to blame victims. His teacher was, putting it in all this beautiful, flowery, spiritual concept. Okay. Sugarcoating and sprinkles. And how this is all beautiful and wonderful. And meanwhile, it's blatant victim blaming, victim shaming. Let's go and read some comments here. Excuse me again. Melissa says, if you're in a group that does shaming, demonizing, shunning, victim blaming, etc., you might be in a cult. That is true. That is very prominent behavior in cults. That is true. I'm really glad that you pointed that out. That's very prominent. However, in a lot of spiritual circles that would not really be technically referred to as cults, just your average, yoga teacher training or energy healing training or spiritual circle or whatever, there's this kind of shaming and demonizing going on in many of them. And I just don't even have enough hours to go through all the stories. It is incredible. Barbara says, or being led by a narcissist. Yeah. That reminds me of I've did a couple of other videos in the last couple of months talking about, there was one called 9 Red Flags of False Spiritual Teachers, and there were a couple of other ones about using discernment in choosing energy healers and teachers. There's, unfortunately, the spiritual community, the New Age community, because of the nature of what it's about, it tends to attract a lot of narcissists, sociopaths, and sometimes even psychopaths, and abusive people who are intent on abusing their power, because there's a lot of people who are trying to heal their trauma and they want someone to follow. And I'm not shaming anyone for that. I'm recognizing that there's a lot of people who, I mean, just being on this planet is traumatizing for so many of us, and it seems only natural that we would want to be able to follow someone. So it's a very easy target for narcissists and sociopaths and etc. So yeah, so if you haven't seen those videos, go look on my channel, Psychic Protection Sanctuary on YouTube, and find those. Melissa says, no, sometimes the other person wants the light or wants to trap or tag that person. Or right. So you're talking about the guy at the Indian restaurant. It's not just that, the woman had a low vibration. What Melissa is saying is that, no, sometimes the other person, so the perpetrator, wants that person's light, that beautiful vibration, or wants to trap that person or disempower that person. So exactly. So sometimes when the person has a higher vibration, it can make them a target. Barbara says, you go, Maya. I think you're probably talking about me, like throwing a dish in the guy's face. I've had a tendency in the past to be a little too passive. I probably should have done something at that dinner, but I was a little too nice. That's something I'm working on healing in myself. Nick says, I've heard a lot of that about attracting the lower vibration. Yeah, he attracted a kick in the cojones. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. Tana says, wow, I actually feel that in some situations. The higher our vibe, the more we may be a target to stop us. And that's actually what I see a lot in my work in psychic protection. In my other free Facebook group, Psychic Protection Sanctuary, I see a lot of the phenomenon where people end up being targets of psychic attack or entity issues simply because of the fact that their vibration is high and their soul purpose is a high calling. And so that is what has made them a target rather than being low vibration. But if anybody has an issue, I don't know if you all have noticed this, but if you've experienced a horrific event, like, having been attacked, or like the story about the rape that I just talked about, or if you're dealing with illness, or if you have been dealing with psychic attack or unwanted paranormal activity, like any of that, have you noticed that you've experienced shunning or shaming by people in the spiritual community who are saying, oh, you must be of a low vibration, otherwise you wouldn't have attracted that to yourself. So if you've experienced any of that, shunning or shaming, go ahead and give me a thumbs up, and just so I can see how many people we have. So I know for me personally, I've experienced some shunning and shaming when I started to come out about some of the issues I was having a few years ago with unwanted paranormal activity, which I was eventually able to clear. But there were people in the spiritual community who blocked me in an instant, and I get it. Well, it goes back to the positive vibes only. There's this avoidance of anything that's uncomfortable. So it's like anything that might activate any of their own need for healing gets avoided completely. I get it. It's still annoying though. I personally have experienced shunning and shaming regarding illness because I've been healing for many years now have been working on healing. I'll just for simplicity's sake, I'll call it an autoimmune issue. And I've literally had people like unfriend me, people who are local energy healers, and even people who train other energy healers, who have said that I was too victim-y because I would speak about the illness online. Meanwhile, when I would speak about it, there would be other people who would come forward and say, thank you so much for talking about what you're going through. Now I don't feel like I'm so alone. But the people practicing ungrounded spirituality and dissociation and shaming were the ones that like slammed the door, and they're like, nope, you're too negative. You're too, what was the term? Victim-y. You're too victim-y. And so I don't want to talk to you. Okay, then. That's the right of any person to decide whatever is right for them. But in my humble opinion, I am HO, it's still very ungrounded spiritual practice. It's all about avoidance of what is, avoidance of what's in front of you. The manipulation, shunning, shaming, gaslighting, that also connects in with the fact that there are tons of sexual predators and other kinds of predators and abusers in the spiritual community, which I just mentioned a minute ago. And boundary violators. Okay, so in the manipulation and shunning and shaming and gaslighting category, let's talk about boundaries. Have you ever been at a spiritual event or in a spiritual circle or something, and you or someone else tried to set a healthy boundary, and the other people in the group all shamed or shunned? Like, no, you're supposed to be in your heart. You're supposed to accept everyone exactly how they are, blah, 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 blah. Right? Have you, give me a thumbs up if you've ever witnessed that or experienced that yourself. Okay, so before we go on to the final category, I'm going to get a drink of water, and maybe you could too. Get a drink of water, take a little breath here. Let's just take a second to recap. So far, we've talked about some ungrounded spiritual practices that might include emotional dissociation. We've also talked about some practices or occurrences that might include manipulation, shunning, shaming, gaslighting, demonizing behaviors. And our third category that we're going to talk about is disconnection from your humanity. And before we go into that, let's read Melissa's comment. Melissa says, yes, what I don't like is when someone feels they can put their hand on my heart chakra without my permission. Oh my God. Melissa, that is one of my pet peeves, is this whole like consent. I'm really into consent now. And whether it's touching you physically or accessing your energy without your consent, that's a big pet peeve of mine. And that when you speak up and try to set a boundary, a lot of times there's shaming that occurs by the other people. Like, oh, yeah, whether it's overt shaming or it's quiet, like, oh, she just doesn't get it. She's just low vibe, or he's just low vibe. They just don't get it, right? There's this judging of like less spiritual. I actually had I was at a session where I was receiving some work from someone, and afterwards they asked if they could give me a hug. So there was consent. There was consent requested, which was great. And I said yes to the hug. I did not say yes to a big, long, smushy hug where they won't let me go and they are trying to connect our heart chakras together. I didn't give permission for that. So I end up in this hug where this person has wrapped around me, and then they take this deep breath. And our heart chakras are connected. and I'm trying to step back and they're holding on tighter. And I'm like, son of a bitch, this person has just connected our heart chakras together, and I don't want to be connected to that person's heart chakra. That's my choice, you know. And that is so, oh my gosh. And just like a couple of months after that, I was in Sedona, and I had the same weird hug thing happen where the person wouldn't let me go. Actually, JP Sears does these really funny videos and about spirituality, and he recently did a video about the weird, creepy hugging thing. But Melissa, you reminded me of that with the hand on the heart chakra. That the thing is if you speak up and set a boundary, then there's either this spoken or unspoken judgment that like, oh, you're just not love and light. You're just not very spiritual. And it's just crazy. It's just weirdness, because that kind of thing is really ungrounded. Raise your hand or like tap the thumbs up if you've ever had anybody do eye gazing with you without your consent. Eye gazing is when someone comes up really close to your face and they just look directly into your eyes, and they just have this unwavering gaze, and they just keep gazing at you and gazing at you and gazing at you, and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't even know this person. I've never met this person before. I just walked into this spiritual circle to go to a drumming circle or whatever, and there's this person who's like, they have me by the shoulders and they're doing this eye gazing thing, which is supposed to connect your spirits together. Like, and then if you say, please stop that, what happens, right? There's judgment. Maybe they're shaming or even gaslighting that, oh, well, you're just not very open. But the lack of consent and the lack of boundaries is a real problem, very, very ungrounded. Let's see here. And Melissa says, or when they start massaging my shoulders. Yeah, I actually knew a, quote, energy healer who liked to go around and massage every woman's shoulders, who was only these, attractive women, or the women. So he didn't do it on the elderly women, only the women that he might be interested in, who were like his age or younger. And he would go and massage all of their shoulders, and he would connect to all of their energies, and it was just so icky. Melissa says, it's good to have a few pat phrases practiced ahead of time so you don't feel stunned when something happens and then freeze. And Melissa, that is a great suggestion, and I highly recommend it. So if you've had a problem with the weird hugs, or some other kind of issue, whatever it may be with boundaries, think ahead of time of something really short, just some short thing that you can say that you've practiced, so that you can just say it in the moment when it happens. So let's see. Melissa says, I disconnect and call back my energies and send theirs back after each event I go to. Good idea. Nick says, do you think the laying on of hands is dangerous, like at a church, if you don't know the people? Well, here's what I would say, Nick. If you go to a laying on of hands event, or if you go to a New Age energy healing circle or a Reiki circle or something like that, the fact that you're going to the event, that is giving your consent. Okay, so if it's an event, like if it's like a healing event where it's where there's like full knowledge that there's going to be laying on of hands, and just by going there, you're giving your consent. However, as I'm speaking this out, I'm recognizing that might not be exactly what you were talking about. For example, if you go to a church where it's just a normal Sunday service, and then some random person comes up to you and puts their hands on you and says, I need to heal you. Yeah, that's a consent issue for sure. And the same kind of shaming would certainly, I think, likely happen in that context as it would in the New Age. So it's all very similar, just different packaging, but it's all very similar. And Barbara says, "May I help you?" is my response always. Yeah, if that works for you, that's awesome. Actually, with the hugging, I figured out a little thing that I can do when I try to step out of it and it's like, oh, they're not letting go. I figured out, I brainstormed with a friend and we decided that then I bring my arms out and down and I push their arms away and I step back and I just look at them and I say, thank you. And it's like setting a strong boundary, but also being courteous. So that's my way of doing it. Melissa says, you can say, no, thank you. God is already healing me. That's great. Thank you for saying that, Melissa. I agree with that. And actually, there's also a common occurrence when I've gone to psychic fairs and holistic fairs where like an energy healer will be walking around and next thing I know, they've got their hand on me. They're trying to heal me. And I will step back and say, no, thank you. And I'll put my hand up, no, thank you. And now they often will look upset. They'll look like you offended them or their feelings are hurt. But don't worry about that. You know, you're setting a healthy boundary. Let's get on to our third one because this is going kind of long because it's a lot to talk about. Disconnecting from your humanity is another form of ungrounded spirituality. So let me give you a few examples of this. The Ascension movement or 5D movement. The Ascension movement is all about like as humans, we are ascending into the 5D. We're ascending into this spiritual way of being. And so there's, again, we get back into the shunning and shaming. There's a lot of shunning and shaming that I see with people who are just trying to do normal human stuff. Like, well, you're just not ascending to the 5D because you're paying your taxes or like doing some like normal human thing. And it's like they're spending all this time trying to ascend and trying to be up here in La La Land, but meanwhile they're not taking care of their own basic needs, and I've seen that a lot. So that's one example of disconnecting from the human experience. Another way of looking at disconnecting from the human experience is also when we're so much focusing on the spiritual and we're spending hours and hours on meditation or saying our positive affirmations or looking at our vision board, and then we're completely avoiding the homeless people or the hungry people or the people who are sick or the people who are hurting or in need somehow. We're ignoring all of that aspect of humanity because we're trying to ascend and we're focusing on all of this la-la spiritual stuff and totally disconnecting from what's happening actually for real on the planet that really needs focus and attention now. Okay? So that whole practice of ascension is really ungrounded. Now, a more balanced approach would be to focus on raising one's vibration, which I love. I love raising my vibration. Focus on raising your vibration, focus on your spiritual life, and also on being grounded, and also on helping your neighbors, also on social justice, also on helping the planet, etc. Disconnecting from your humanity. Let me give another example, which actually kind of fits into all three categories. I call it cancel, clear, delete. And it really does fit into all categories because it's emotional dissociation, it's shunning and shaming, and it's also disconnecting from humanity. By cancel, clear, and delete, what I mean, I'm referring to actually what I'm going to do is just share with you a story. This is exactly what I mean by cancel, clear, delete. This was like 9 years ago. I went to a spiritual circle, and I'd been going for a year and a half. And when I was driving there, I was thinking, oh man, I'm really struggling. I'm really scared about some things in my life. I'm going through this really hard time. Like there were some really major struggles, and I really needed support. So I decided ahead of time, you know, when we have our opening circle and we all, each of us has the talking stick, and we each have an opportunity to share, I want to really be honest about how I'm feeling, and that I feel really, really scared and overwhelmed. So when I went into the circle, that's what I did. I shared how I was really feeling. And as I was talking, the facilitator interrupted me, and she said, Maya, cancel, clear, delete. And I said, what? She said, you are drawing those things into your life by talking to them, and you have to stop doing that. And I was like, oh my God. So I really needed support. I needed to be heard, and I needed my struggle to be heard. I just needed to be able to be authentic. And this facilitator, the spiritual teacher that I really looked up to, told me, no, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to emotionally dissociate, and I'm going to shame you for having a real human experience, and I'm going to tell you that you should instead disconnect from your actual human experience. So that's what I call cancel, clear, delete. Give me a thumbs up if you've ever had that happen before. If you've ever been in a circle where you've been having an experience that was human and messy, and you were told that that was not okay. Okay. Let's see here. We've already talked about a lot of this. I talked about the 5D and the ascension movement. There's also, kind of connected with that, is the ultra spiritual guy or gal that's like, they speak in a soft voice, and they're all like ultra spiritual all the time, and we're all just energy, and da 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 da. And I'm not trying to make fun of anybody here. If that's how someone wants to be, that's their choice, that's okay. But it's very ungrounded, and it's not connected. Like, they're totally disconnecting from all of the richness of all of the many other layers that they are. The last thing that I'll bring up is, in terms of disconnecting with our humanity, is something that's common in Buddhist practice. Now, as with all these practices, I love Buddhist practices. I love many of these practices that we've talked about, but it's about balance and not taking it to an unhealthy degree. So what I'm referring to is non-resistance and acceptance of what is. So this is my reality. I just accept what is, because when I resist, it causes suffering. So if we take that teaching to the extreme degree, then we never take action to work on improving our lives, or to improve the lives of other humans or other creatures on the planet. So we need to be careful to not take that teaching, the total acceptance and non-resistance, to an extreme level to where it's totally ungrounded and not anchored into reality. Let's see if there's anything else. I have a million other ideas, but I think we'll just stop there. We have some more comments. Nick says, thank you, Melissa and Maya. And Melissa says to Nick, at least they asked, some don't, about the laying on of hands. And it's a spiritual violation to pray for someone without asking, unless you say, of course, only if it's in divine right order. Yeah, that's a whole other can of worms about doing energy work or saying prayers without someone's consent. We're not going to go there today. That's a whole other video. Let's see. And Melissa says, talking lets you get it out of the body so it doesn't fester. You can then look at the issues more clearly. Exactly. So I know that what I've talked about here is definitely not an exhaustive list of ungrounded spiritual practices, but hopefully it has gotten you thinking about some of the things, like some of the spiritual practices that maybe you've taken for granted, that you just haven't even questioned. I would really like to encourage you to become a questioner. Question everything. Ask if it's being done in a grounded and healthy and uplifting way, or if the practice is being done in a way that's encouraging emotional dissociation or disconnecting from your humanity, or if there's any shunning or shaming or gaslighting going on. So the idea here is to develop more discernment so that you can really have the healthiest spirituality for you. And again, what I said at the beginning is that there's billions of people who have all unique spiritual beliefs and practices, and we can honor all of them while also encouraging having a higher level of discernment and groundedness. So again, I hope that gives you food for thought. I'm going to go ahead and sign off for tonight. But before I do, just a quick little blurb to remind you that you can find out more about me at my website, psychicprotectionsanctuary.com. And if you're interested in working with me more deeply, then there's a program on my website listed under the events and classes tab. It's called the Spiritual Empowerment Academy, and it is a really awesome group that we have, and I encourage you to check it out. If it resonates with you, go ahead and fill out the application. We do have a couple of other comments here. Melissa says, feel into your solar plexus. Does it feel tight? Listen to your body when you're in a group or you're thinking of trying something new. Excellent advice. Nick says, so glad I got home in time to listen in. Great info, Maya. You're welcome. And Melissa says, thank you, Maya Zahira. You're welcome. You're welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm going to jump off because I'm going to teach another class in 10 minutes for one of my paid programs. So I'm going to have to take off now. As always, this replay will be on my Psychic Protection Sanctuary Facebook channel and also on my Psychic Protection Sanctuary YouTube channel, and it will also be on Facebook as well. So I will see you all later. I'll see you all next month for our next Facebook Live. Until then, sending you all my love.